When it comes to drawing, this time we'll explore fabrics, there are two basic approaches: copying what you see or understanding what you see and drawing that. Now, they both produce usable results, but I'd argue that understanding is far more powerful than mere observation. What do you see? Garments? Certainly. Differences? Probably, but subconsciously. Texture or feel? Probably not. Now let's try that again, but this time we'll use conscious thought. This man is wearing a thick knitted jumper. We know that without a shadow of doubt. But why do we know that? This woman has a lightweight figure-hugging dress. It could be made from a man-made material such as nylon, but let's assume it's natural silk. Well, it meets all the expected criteria, even though we don't consciously know what those criteria are. This one's easy, isn't it? Common denim. In this case, jeans. Except we know that without a second glance. Not twill, not corduroy, not cotton or linen or polyester. Denim, 100% positively denim. And this linen probably sits between denim and silk. We can immediately see it's lighter and more closely woven than denim. Obviously not knitted, and less reflective and heavier than silk, but not so heavy that it can pull out its own creases. Let's try just one more, fleece, which has a totally different surface texture because the combing completely hides the weave beneath, and it's instantly recognisable. But that's the point. They are all instantly recognisable. Not in a that's such and such a fabric way, but in a light, heavy, thick, thin, I know how it feels way. A way that requires no conscious thought, and that's why we artists need to study them, to raise them to conscious level. And this is important. Each texture has a code built into it, an essence that we recognise. Study, extract the code, insert it into a drawing, and whatever your style, you'll transmit the exact same message. This is hard, or soft, or coarse and rough under my exploring fingertips. Everything contains the clues to its being, clues that we instinctively understand. So we need to look and think and understand to reveal the clues before we can confidently use them. That said, instead of thought, vision and understanding, you could copy. Now that might capture some of the essence, possibly successfully, but copying is so very restrictive. It nails you down to that surface in that location under those conditions. Understand the clues, and you have the freedom to transmit your message under any circumstances. Let's take silk. I could say, just draw what you see. Well, it's lighter here, slides into shadow there. Carefully blend the two where they meet. But so much better is to notice that there are only folds, no creases. Silk folds and wraps around. It doesn't stick out at odd angles. It never forms sharp creases. Oh, but now you're beginning to unlock its code. It does only form folds. It never forms sharp creases. It folds and hangs and wraps around. And we can extract more. It's so fine a weave that the weave itself is effectively invisible. And that close weave makes the fabric surprisingly reflective. It also incidentally has a reverse side that is less reflective. That's satin. So now we can use all the clues of silk, adjust the reflective quality, and clearly state satin. This might have the opposite of silk, heavy and thick, a coarse weave with rounded creases. It's too thick and stiff to form sharp knife edge creases. Also, this cloud has simple seams. Always look for unique properties that you can use to your advantage. Denim jeans, for example, have a unique multi-layered seam, one that divides into alternate dips and crests along its length. Draw that undulating seam and you make it crystal clear that the garment is denim. So I'm going to draw the canvas bag that I can't find. If I'm not quite sure how to begin, the piece that I rest my hand on is the same paper that I'm drawing on. So if necessary, I could always have a practice first to get the feel for it. This is fabric. I want to try to gently suggest the warp and weft of the weave. Let's have a go in here. The material sticks out there, goes back into the shade, comes back out. So I'm going to say that that's coming out into the highlight. I have photos of similar canvas bags to help me reproduce this one. They're in the download pack if you want to try this yourself. And I'm using what I think is the obvious choice to represent its surface appearance, cross-hatching, following the warp and weft of the cloth as it folds and dips and rises. In this case, the texture contains the chief visual clues. Knowing it's a cloth bag rather than plastic or leather seems rather important. I wasn't quite certain which grade to begin with, so I chose an HB. It seems to be working out fine, but 2B appears to be describing the texture better, with an occasional layer of 2H to dull any white content and reinforce the three-dimensional form. You know, I think my initial confusion was caused by the fact that I'm drawing this the wrong way. That is, you know when you're drawing hair that you draw the gaps and not the hairs, because the gaps are darker, so you draw those to create the hairs in between. Well, the same applies here. Strictly speaking, I should be drawing the holes in the weave, but I'm not. You have to ask yourself, why do I know this is canvas? Well, I think the weave is the most noticeable feature, the principal visual clue. So I'm drawing hatch lines very close to each other and aiming to be subtle. There should be just enough line remaining to suggest the coarse weave. Any more, and it might send us signals for Hessian sacking, where I think the holes and coarse weave are equally dominant clues. My lines simply need to suggest the weave of the canvas, in the way that causes the viewer's mind to see and understand the visual clues, the remnants of the crisscrossing lines that say, this is canvas. I want to move to a lighter area now to get a feeling for that. I always fade the guidelines before I start on the area and then draw it more accurately. This is 2B, to the point, but I'm using the edge rather than the flat face to make sure I get well into the tooth. I don't want any white holes from the tooth remaining. This is just to remind me that that runs off into the shade. This isn't the finished shaping. We've got a thin highlight running around there. I want to maintain that. That's that piece I pushed back into the shade. But we'll have a go at this area in here. I'm going to concentrate on the horizontal weave first because that'll help me get the shaping right. I'm steering clear of that line at the moment because I can't really work out what it needs to look like until I've completed the areas around it. We'll go to 2H and we'll use the vertical shading to fill in the white. Every line is tapered. There is an even lighter area there, which I like because I've got the light shining in from the door. I need to do that first in order to gauge how bright that should be. When that's done, I think that is now too dark, but I'll show you how you can lighten that quite simply. I think that is too dark. So you get a bit of Blu-Tack and we pinch a little finger and we can very gently just lighten this down. You can stroke it or dab it. There's different effects. I want to leave it darker just there. We can take a bit more out here and still leave the weave showing. That's what I was trying to achieve. When you're shaping areas like this, this is where the Blu-Tack comes into its own. Let me show you what I'm trying to do here. Sort of emulating this area here. I like this little crease running through there, little bulge. But it's a very subtle little bulge, so I think what we're going to do is gradually build it up. Just lightly darker than you think it should be. And then I pinch a little point of Blu-Tack. You know, this is effectively blending without losing the definition. Blending makes everything softer. This just makes it lighter. And it also doesn't flatten the tooth. So you can try again and again, take it off, apply it, take it off. It doesn't really matter at all because the Blu-Tack doesn't damage the tooth. That's 2B. And keeps the edge sharp. Gives me a little safety margin to shade up to. And I can put my pencil into that line and then pull it out. Although I always say apply hard over soft, because the hard grades contain more fine clay which fills the tooth. You can use that to your advantage sometimes, and I'm about to do that. This is 2H, and I'm going to use HB in a minute to strengthen the values in here. This area in here. And by putting the 2H down first, when I switch to HB, I've got more control now because the paper doesn't have the same opportunity to grip onto the graphite because there is already fine clay in the tooth. I am going to blend this, and this is very unusual, ever so slightly, because it just teases those edges out. That's all I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to destroy any white because canvas bags just don't exhibit white. You've got to remember that blending always lightens, so you need to over apply the graphite a bit if you know you're going to do that. I'm going to take just a little bit of highlight out of here and just curve it off. And I'll just go back and just tease those edges out again. I'm going to have to do the strap next. The darks in here I think will help me to decide whether the highlights in here are correct. And once I've got those sort of the way I want them, I can bounce that and this to this side of the bag. I don't want this overly dark. I want to be able to see the strap. I want to see the buckle in there, but not too much because I don't want it to attract too much attention. Right, that's the plan. This edge is going to be quite broken, and because the weave is going to be going across that, I'm not going to try and copy it. What I am going to do is break it up. So I'm just going to go down here and create a rather irregular edge. Just enough, I hope, to suggest that that canvas is going over that edge. The light is going to catch it, I think, around here probably. So, first of all, even though this might not be visible once it's completed, there might just be remnants of this line remaining. I'll lighten it a little bit along here. Usual thing, it's drawing lines with tapered ends from both directions so they overlap in the middle. I like this edge running through here which is just where it tips over the top. It's always preferable when you can to draw away from an edge. It's just safer. You can put your pencil into the edge, draw away, taper the end, always taper the end. And then you can go into the other side, join up, taper the end. A taper over a taper is just a line with no join. Just to repeat what I was just saying, draw away from an edge. If you know what the value it's going to be in this area, then you can outline it first. Draw along that edge, which is what I've done here, and also around the buckle, because I know pretty well what value it's going to be here. That line should disappear. But if you try to draw down and stop, that's fraught with problems. You can very easily overshoot. But if you outline, it gives you a little safety margin, and then you can get into that outline and draw away, always tapering the ends of the lines so they overlap seamlessly. Might look as though there's no detail in this area, but that's really because I'm trying to kill the detail. I don't want it to attract attention. You're not going to concern yourself with the stitching. This thing can go way, way back into the shade. At this end, I'll push it right back. I think I might just pick out a little highlight on that edge. Flat face HB. That might be enough, I think. I'm just doing a little planning next. I'm thinking that I can't draw this until this is in. And this bit I think is going to be troublesome until I know what's going on in here. So I think we're going to do this area, possibly that strap then, because that will lead us into this. It's always helpful to plan. Right, this area next. This area in here. I'll use my go-to tool for this, which is a colour shaper. So it takes minimal graphite, just lightens very gently. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to treat this area in here. Whenever you've got an area that you're not sure about, I find it's better if you just ignore it, work around it. Once that's surrounded by drawing, I should have a much better idea of what to do in there. So I'm going to start up here, more in the shadows, coming back down into this hole here. So I'm going to start up here, I think. I try not to use erasers because they can flatten the tooth, but this is a 2B outline. It really is in the tooth at all. This rolled edge is casting a little bit of shadow under its edge. In my world it is anyway. The beauty of drawing. This is my world, I make the rules. Well, you can make the rules or break them, but they do have to make logical sense. I mean, for example, I mentioned earlier that silk or similar nylon satin does not form knife edge creases. In use, when it hangs, that's true. But fold it, that's a different matter. It's thin, so it might fold very crisply. Canvas or another heavy weave like this bag can't do that. It's simply too thick. The same is true of a heavy knitted garment or a blanket. The well-rounded folds are the visual clue to them being thick and heavy fabrics. A woolly jumper and other knitted clothing folds like a blanket. And of course one of its unique clues is its very visible knitted surface. Another is its soft nature, because all those fly-away multi-directional fibres scatter the light rays and make it non-reflective. And the third is its depth and wide contrast, because knitting, unless it's very fine, invariably consists of both rows and holes. I'm going to move down to this strap. The strap is sewn underneath this, but the stitching is there, and there's there's a line there, which is, I think, the top of the strap that's pushing from behind the fabric. I rather want to keep that little touch of highlight along that edge. You could do with one anyway, because it will help to define that edge. This flat face feels lovely. Because it's on a previously drawn area that's been erased, this is really just skating, sliding over the paper beautifully. Very slippery, which means I can be very subtle with the shading and feather edges quite easily. I love this circular shading. No line, just soft edges. I always call it sculpting because there's no need to stop. There's no break in concentration. You can just sculpt an area, sculpt its three-dimensional form as you're working. Just circle after circle until it begins to look the way you see it in your mind. I'm just going to brighten that a little tiny bit along there. This is how we're doing so far. Not trying to copy it, just taking what I want, discarding what I don't want. I love that bump on the end of that strap. I just need to get this curve in now to account for that shadow coming back down to hair. So why not try this yourself, using the link below to the reference material and guideline drawings. You could draw any of the canvas bags or your own. And if you join the Draw with Mike community, we can help you and critique it and offer advice at any stage in our support forum. And you'll have a wealth of knowledge available to you in all the videos, from the beginners level through intermediate and beyond. Well, suddenly we're nearly reaching completion. There's a fair bit of finessing still to do. That edge is wrong in there. That's a dark line. Nothing has an outline. So either that's got to be lightened or this has got to be darker, or a combination of the two. So I'll take a little bit of that out. Just darken the background until the outline disappears. But from here on it's in the shade. That's looking better. I don't like this. There's no mystery. It's a bit too obvious. There needs to be a bit of mystery just here. This needs to disappear back into the shade. I'll go to 2B. I'll try and push that even further back. And then 2H on top of that to smooth it down because the 2B is too grainy. I'm quite happy with that. I'll go and have a coffee and then I'll come back to it and have a fresh look. The only thing I want to alter is this little bit here. There's an outline running around that. Nothing in life, as they say, has a line around it. So I want to just darken up that area just to the point that the outline disappears. I'm quite happy with that. Little bit of 2H on the top just to smooth it out. Actually, a little bit of HB on that. There's a bit of a gap there. And there. That's better. Okay, we're done. So I think we're talking about 5.5 hours. And I'm calling that done. Well, that was canvas, and I used hatching, the obvious choice because it echoes the weave. But sometimes it's not obvious at all. This lovely soft fleece is one of those textures. Lacking sharp edges, it's difficult to analyse. But I instantly think soft and deep. That's probably because this fleece, like any fleece, it's like a sheep's fleece. It's made up of bunches of hair, and it parts through deep valleys wherever it's bent around a curve. And that's one of its main visual clues. I found this was a texture best begun in areas of little interest, That approach allows you to experiment a little until you get a feeling for the surface. I began Charlotte's Fleece on the left before spending time drawing in more detail on the right. Don't take anything you see at face value. Ask yourself questions and dig a little deeper. Talk to yourself. Describe the surface. And don't be afraid to veer away from the reference. Here I deliberately drew the collar with sharp internal edges and maximum contrast, because that sharpness increases the softness of Charlotte's flawless 2-year-old skin. And of course it also makes the fleece look softer. Nothing has to look exactly like your reference. Don't just copy. Copies have no soul, no personal input. So tell me what interests or excites you. Describe the form and textures. You've a story to tell, your story. And you can't do that by copying someone else's photos. Whatever the texture, think, analyse, and whether virtual or physical, run your fingertips over it. Now you're drawing what you know and feel. Don't just draw what you see, an impersonal collection of shapes and values. Always ask yourself questions. Take the time to get to know and feel what you're about to draw. And before you know it, you'll be drawing very believable, realistic and instantly recognisable fabric textures. Well, the bag's helping to tell my story. The lovely bearded collie patiently ready and waiting. To leave for work, or just to walk, you decide. Have a go at the bag yourself. The whole bag, just a section of it, or draw your own. Use the link below to download your helpful reference photos and guideline drawing, ready for you to begin. Check out DrawWithMike as somewhere to go for learning, and to post your drawing so we can enjoy it and help you if you need it. Because there's only one way to learn, and that's to draw.